So thank you very much on behalf of Lucy and I for the opportunity to come here today. And I don't just say that as a nice way to begin something, because Auckland needs more of these sorts of gatherings. And the wonderful thing is it's starting to happen with far more frequency. Down at Grid Auckland, what AUT Collab are doing, what we're trying to create here in Britomart, this burgeoning creative community coming together more often than answering briefs or trying to bitch or complain about clients, but rather coming together to say, how can we do things that make, through reciprocity, our creative community better? So it's an honor to be here today, so we thank you very much. So that's us. And also because the topic of creative collaboration, because the thing about the notion of creative collaboration, it's fun from the outset. People get a wry grin when they say it. People like the idea of doing it. It's a really easy thing to talk about, and in our experience, it's bloody hard to do. Or rather, it's very hard to do well. And maybe the irony is, and part of the definition of what do we mean by well. Because we've, over our working career together, have had a number of instances where people have come to us and said, look, we've got this particular brief or project or opportunity, would you like to be part of it? And we'd say, yeah, that sounds really interesting. To which you'd say, well, you've got to be good collaborators. And we'd say, yeah, so what do you mean by that? And usually, the sorts of responses we'd then get is, do you play nicely? And, you know, if you interrogate that, not much of the creative process is about mutual appreciation. Sitting down and saying, oh, no, that's really good, and you're really good, and we're all really good, because that's a rotary meeting, not a creative process. And so, yes, we respect other people's contributions, and yes, we like get along with other people, but I don't think in of itself playing nicely is what sits at the heart of creative collaboration. Nor is, look, here's a set of to-do lists, and if you do those, then we'll do these, and I think we'll get there in the end. It's implicit you have to divide up tasks and do things that others don't do, but sharing isn't what sits for us at the heart of creative collaboration. And nor is the idea you collaborate when you're flat out. So actually one of those ones where a client says, look, here's an opportunity, would you like to be part of it? And you say, that sounds really interesting, we might collaborate on this one, which often means we don't have the bandwidth or the energy to put it into it. And in our experience, partly creative collaboration, which was a business idea that we set out to build for ourselves 9 or so years ago, has a number of different facets to it that are far more than just coming up with an idea. So in this sense, and what we're going to talk a little bit about today is that creative collaboration, yes, implicitly in that or explicitly it is to have a wonderful idea, to find a way to come up with that has some meaning. But that's not where the creative process starts and stops. And what we've found most inspiring or motivating me part of is saying, okay, now you have to fund that idea. When you are blessed to get a brief that has a budget, that's one sort of creative collaboration. When you come up with an idea and then say, right, to actually do something, we now have to fund this, or we have to raise the money to fund it, that's another whole form of collaboration. And yes, you can come up with the money, but then actually to spend that money, as you said you were going to spend that money, and actually to launch something is something in of itself. And then once that happens, then the final part of collaboration is knowing that you've done something that people like. And inevitably, they don't like everything you've done, and you'll make mistakes. So how do you be big enough to learn from those mistakes, acknowledge when they happen, and so the process creates itself again as we come back and have different ideas to try and fund those. And for us to do that sort of collaboration for Lucien and my partnership, business partnership, that was not about a wacky idea of having an art director and a copywriter, because I'm not a creative and he is a creative. And it wasn't about saying, no, we'll have different teams, so we'll have creatives and designers and web designers and so forth working with us. At the core of our team is I'm a suit and Lucien's a creative. And what we tried to do around that is to build a notion of saying, if the historic way that agency models have worked, you take space in a building, you fill it with creative people, some wear suits, some wear shorts, that's how the model works. And you're only as good as the overhead that can afford, as opposed to what the new economy is allowing us to do, which is to go out to the best and breed partners from around the world and collaborate with them. Get them to do what they're best at, but only at what they're best at. Pay them really well, treat them as partners, which forms a completely different model of collaboration. And that's part of what we've enjoyed doing over the period that we've been working together. So it goes sort of to give you the 2-minute background on how that worked. We were friends at university. I was in a good rugby team. Lucien wasn't, but that's okay. So we remained mates. Lucien was working at Colenso, got a job in an agency in London called Mother. I worked at Lion in sales and marketing here, and then was offered a job at Saatchi & Saatchi in London. Lucien to this day is probably the only guy that left Mother in London to join Saatchi, but we worked together there for a while. We did some things in the UK before coming back to New Zealand to set up Shine. Shine is a advertising, design, creative agency. In many ways similar to a number of other agencies. We work with well-known brands, but what we tried to do from the outset is saying it's not just another version of a smaller version of a large advertising agency. And partly by that's the diversity of the sorts of work that we do. About a third of our work is in design. We've won architecture awards, interior design awards. We've set up different things for clients in New Zealand and around the world. And what we found started happening for us is that when a client would give us a brief and we'd ask questions before the brief, yes, never mind about the advertising you want, but could we talk about the packaging? Or never mind the packaging, could we talk about distribution? Or we started having very different levels of conversations with very different levels of people within an organisation. And in the case of Lion, what that started to become was, hey, yes, we can do your advertising for Max, but before we do that, we should look at your bars because the bars don't feel like they're working very well. What they went on to is that we led a process of redeveloping 11 of the Max brew bars. We did that from scratch. We bought an architect. We recreated that business, which is a business now worth in excess of $25 million a year. It's a very successful business for them. We then worked on their brewery, and that gave us a different blueprint on the way that we wanted to work. And because of that, what we started to happen is that people would come to us not with briefs, but with business plans. And in an instance, a guy came to us and said, look, I want to open a hair colouring studio, which balding is not necessarily my strength, but they said, we'd love you to come on that journey with us, And we created a business with them called Hue, which is now a hair colouring salon that someone in the room will be aware of. We created 2 online beverage companies, one called Vine Online, the other called Whiskey and More. We then went on to create with someone a cafe chain called Shaky Isles, and the brief was, we want to create a cafe, it wants to be about New Zealand, so we named it, we came up with the artwork, we did the interior design for what is now Shaky Isles. And in doing that, we got sort of the bug of saying, look, this is great, but the remuneration model was fairly traditional, we want to do it for ourselves. And that led us 4 years ago to open a hospitality business. And the first play of the hospitality businesses were 3 businesses still going now, which is Tyler Street Garage, Abisu and Fukuko. In a derelict car park building, which was used as the 42 below car park, which became Tyler Street Garage, blowing a hole through that to have a kitchen that serves 3 businesses, which was fantastic, really intimidating, a very different way to work when it is actually your money that you're raising and it's your ideas that you'll be judged on. Some were great, some we didn't get right. And then 2 years ago, we set out on the next stage, which was what's now called Ostro, Spark Lab and the Seafarers Club. And all of those projects have in common, or the top ones have in common, one building, which is the one we're in now, which, for those that don't know, was a old sailors' home. And you can still see the dormitory marks on the roof. This is where sailors would come off sea. The little marks here were the shape of their dormitories. It was a 7-level facility for sailors to drink, swap stories, do whatever they might have. But it sat empty for 20 years. And Lucien, to his credit, came up with a thought that we should do something in there. And when you come up with one of those thoughts and your business partner comes to you one day and says, hey, I've got a new idea, and you think, great, we've cracked the next brief. And he says, no, it's that building, which is 8 levels, 1,600 square metres. There was no power. There was one lift. That's as slow as it is today. That's because they used to get coffins in and out of it. That's the way, it's the size it is. That's the reason it goes at the speed that it does, because the sailors, bless them, would rest in peace in here. So it sat empty for a long, long time, and our idea was to take that and do something with it. So we thought there was a good opportunity, but it was very intimidating from the outset. But because of that, and probably the narrative by which the rest of this will go through is the process that we worked through on creative collaboration, and what for us has been our sort of, I guess, our 5 principles on the best way that collaborating and through creativity works. So I'll hand to Lucien to kick off from where it began.
Yeah, okay. Before I go into that, the interesting thing about collaboration is a lot of people think that, and I don't know, well, I don't know what a lot of people think actually, but with collaboration, it does sound like it can be a mutual appreciation society sort of thing, you know, like we're all going to collaborate. Another way to think about it is if you've got the idea and it's your idea and you've got the vision for it, then really the only thing that matters from there on is kind of control. You know, and that sounds like, that's not to say you don't get the best. What I'll go on to talk about is all the amazing people that I got involved because they were amazing and I wanted to work with them. But it can be a little bit like when you go to those car shows and you see these amazing new cars they're going to build. And then 5 years later, they come out with another Toyota Corolla, and this thing's the fucking same as it always was. Because somewhere along the line, the designer said, hey, this is an amazing new car, and we're going to make this. And then they go to the engineer, and he goes, oh, no, I can't do that chassis. You'll have to do the same one as before, blah, 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 blah. And it ends up being the same fucking thing. So it is about kind of once you've got your idea, how, you know, not letting go of it and making sure it ends up still being your idea at the end of it and not another sort of Toyota Corolla. So, so sort of having your idea and making sure you sort of can stay true to it and build the best team. And I guess a lot of me and Simon have spent a long time and still are in advertising agencies, and they're a great place because you get to have all these ideas and you get to be really passionate about them and you get to spend a whole lot of someone else's money, which is a different sort of discipline when it's not yours. So the first idea for Seafarers, I grew up in hospitality, and the first sort of idea was a hotel, and sort of, you know, the first sort of, so how it went was Ostro was stage one, and if you look at all the floors, so some of you have probably been to Ostro, that's a big restaurant. It's actually the same size as this floor. So when I got into that building, it's exactly the same size as what we're sitting in today. The difference is that there was literally boarded up windows, and when we went through the windows, there was a roof. So basically, Ostro exists because the roofs are what makes it the size it is. You're sitting on either side, you're sitting on the roof, which allowed us to kind of think, hey, we could make something of a size that could be an engine and do the turnover to deliver what the other floors could do. So the first idea we sort of had was a restaurant and some hotels, until I worked out how much sort of 10 bathrooms were on each floor, so we didn't do a hotel. And then we went through a number of sort of iterations of what it could be, and we thought it would be great to have a members club, not a stuffy one, but et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of what we tried to create. A lot of people remind us that there hasn't been a members club in Auckland for 80 years, but anyway. So that is kind of, is that right? That's everyone that's sort of involved in this process. So again, when you're in advertising and you're creating a campaign, you might have half a dozen. In a building like this, you've got all of those ones. So you've got to work with experts, and when you're doing a building, you have to work with architects and people that really understand that, and making sure that they're the best in breed. So that's what we did there.
What we started finding, though, it's a little bit like my analogy where I know nothing at all about cars, and when you talk to someone who knows cars, they're very good at one bit, but the tail of their conversation says, no, I could also do this, and I could also do this, and I could also do this. So it became very easy to start talking to generalists, and the approach that we took was to stop doing that. And so one of the guiding principles that we've had is, as long as your budget can afford it, find the very best people you can and only work with those people at what they're best at. So from an architecture perspective for this building, it was Fair and Hay. From a food perspective, it was a Michelin star chef, Josh Emmett, who's a good personal friend of Lucien. From our interior designers, we worked with Deloitte to help us on the capital raise. We found some shareholders that would understand this was going to be a journey because it was a carcass of a building that had no power and no running water really. So without any one of those individuals, the spoke that we showed earlier and the end result would have been a very, very different output, despite the temptation of looking to cut corners in certain areas. And I think what we realised is we could cut corners in the areas that we were really good at because we knew how to make that back up, but areas that we didn't know very well, we had to trust the people that were best at doing what they're best at. The sell of the dream became someone very early on. It was our landlord down here, a credible visionary, Peter Cooper, who we shared with him the whole plan in a sort of a cavalier way, and we said, it's all going to open on September the 1st. And he said, that's fantastic and you're mad, you'll never do it. You need to take an approach like a property developer, because what a property developer would do is sell the whole vision and then release it in stages. And that fundamentally changed everything that we were doing on the project. How we raised our capital, how we went about communicating it. So stage 1 became the engine. We needed something that people could come into. It's wonderful to see Supreme here, who are a key partner of ours. They helped us get going from the ground floor up, and then Austro became the revenue engine effectively, and also the trial mechanism for people for the building. It brings in 2,500 people a week, eating, drinking, socialising. It gives our staff the opportunity to say, hey, what's going on upstairs is, and that was helpful because there was construction going on upstairs, and that wasn't that pleasant within a dining environment. But again, we were blessed with some wonderful partners again, and Tipity's being one today, that when people come on a journey with you because they understand the vision that you're trying to deliver, that's been for us exceptionally helpful. Stage 2 was something that opened in November of last year, which was the private members facilities, this one and 2 above us, which I'll come back to, and Spark Lab. And again, we are only 6 months into this particular journey on the Members Club, but Lucien made that comment earlier about people reminding us that it hadn't been done before. The honest truth is they didn't just remind us, they were quite vindictive about it, and they made it very clear it will fail. And the reason there hasn't been a Members Club is no one's done it because there's no business model in it. And who knows, but what we did know, that sort of gave us the tenacity to want to at least try to prove that the creative community of Auckland aren't just sideline participants. They'll get involved, they'll help, they'll come to nights, they'll connect, they'll show an interest in want of being involved. This was never designed to be a club that you wrap around a blanket on you after lunch and you drink port and talk about what school you went to. It had to have a very different play, which we'll come to shortly. And Spark Lab, similarly, in the final stage, which will open later this year, is 2 floors beneath us, which is a club, events, functions, naughty room to come. So more on that as and when that comes together. The plans are lovely because flash PowerPoint presentations, we've all done them. But then when you have to go on and deliver it, that's another whole thing. And Austro, and you might talk, Liz, to the brasserie feel?
Yeah, so again, like I say, we needed to get a sort of a great chef. He needed to be Michelin star, and he needed to come from Hamilton, where I come from. So there was only one guy. It wasn't a big choice after that. No, so I've known Josh for a long time. So I worked on it for about a year before Josh got involved, and we wanted this modern brasserie, and it took some people a little bit to get their head around that Josh wasn't doing fine dining. But again, it seems not really a big deal now, but again, a lot of having grown up in it, even when I took my old man through it, he said, what, you're building a restaurant 3 floors up? You're fucking mad. But it kind of feels okay now. But yep, it is a little bit hard. Me and a guy, Arch McDonnell, that I'm sure a lot of you guys know from in-house, have collaborated for probably the best part of 6 years on different projects. I have my own agency, I have my own designers, but we bring Arch in all the time. It's not a problem, and my team love working with him as well. So, and me and him have a really good shorthand for stuff. So, it seems obvious when you look at it. It's an old seafarers building. It's an old sailors building. So, there you go, really. It's been yeah.
Spark Lab was was originally inspired by something that Levi's did called Levi's Workshop, and the idea was genuine reciprocity. So how do we create a space that agencies, startups, students, board meetings could take place in an environment that wasn't the Royal Lounge at a casino or a racetrack that has a meeting venue. This needed to be a creative space. So because the floor plate is what you see, it needed to be a Swiss Army knife. And Lucien worked very closely with Curran Lucien Law to design what is now Spark Lab. We went to Spark knowing that they were changing their name. Jason Paris was then the marketing director. We took him a presentation. He had no need to buy it or buy into it. There was no ability to demonstrate return on investment at that stage. But he took a massive leap of faith with us. And as a consequence, we've created what is now Spark Lab, which is a rolling monthly curation around a theme. It's going exceptionally well. At the moment, it's Design Month in conjunction with Semi-Permanent. The international collaboration of that has been phenomenal. We've had musicians, Fat Freddy's Drop, we've had fashion designers, we've had Lord's manager, we've had CEOs of record companies, the CEO of Spotify talking about the future of the industry, all for free, all wanting to give back for a belief that that's how you fuel a creative economy, if you will. So it's been an incredible thing to be part of. Which gets into the Members Club. There is only one other Members Club to speak of in Auckland at the moment, a wonderful institution for a very different audience, for very different needs. And we needed an alternative. The other one needs to exist. So and when we're in UK working in agencies, we used to use the clubs out there, Soho houses and bits and pieces, which became a wonderful way for creative industry types to meet creative industry types. Lucien would often go along they ran a night where an email would go out to Sachi or mother saying, if you've got an idea for a kid's book, come along to Soho House tonight because we've got Penguin Publishers and a couple of others, and here's your chance to pitch your idea, which is incredible. And so they're lovely urban myths that get their own sense of life. To come back to New Zealand 11 years ago, and we didn't find that. So we thought, let's set up that as a facility. And the core proposition was, how do we help things like what's going on this morning happen every day, or as many days as we possibly could? And if you viewed the building as a live magazine, where on every floor there was something going on that was different. You could have fashion designers up on the roof. You could have jazz trio playing. We had Oscar Kitely last night doing an incredible talk. You could have designers working on something with semi-permanent as people are at Ostro and others having a coffee. So as an entity, that felt like it would be quite interesting. And until that point, our view was that there were wonderful nights happening around Auckland, but it would be an event, and that event would finish, and once the things were packed up and people left, that was the end of the continuity. So how could the story continue? And that was the core pitch. To do that, you have to start with the backdrop or the stadium, and for us, it starts with 5 levels. There's 3 levels rather. There's this, which is our screening room. This room gets used for product launches. We had Kylie Bax, the supermodel here, ex-supermodel 2 nights ago, doing an afternoon of some of her favourite things with retail partners collaborating with her. We have board meetings in here. We have brainstormings in here. We have private dining in here. So and we watch the rugby in here. The floor above is our members' lounge. There's a fireside. We have fireside chats up there. James Herman, guys like Andrew Patterson interviewing different people. Jazz trios playing. Low stud ceiling, feels like a New York or a London club. But really importantly, it's a place where people can come from 8 in the morning with free Wi-Fi and work. It's an office away from the office. When people need to, as creative industries need to get out of the office on occasion, it's a great place to do it before you go upstairs to the roof. And there aren't many roof venues in Auckland. This has 360 degrees looking out into the beautiful Waitemata and into Westpac. But it has its own kitchen up the top there. Josh has done the menu. We had Nathan Haynes playing up on the roof there last night. So as a venue, as a backdrop, it starts by getting early signs of approval. Then what we get into very quickly is the ability for creative industry. And when I talk creative industries, I don't mean design or advertising. I mean creative types, people working in law firms and banks and accountancy companies, but have a flair or an interest in creativity. And some of the feedback we got is these people are traveling around the world, doing their work around the world. And at present, a lot of those people are having meetings in Starbucks and or their hotel lobbies. And could we find a way of reaching out to reciprocal clubs so that if you're a member of our club, when you're in those markets, you could get access to theirs? So we started with the same PowerPoint presentation and a large drink, and then started calling them. And we would go through this notion of, look, we've got this view of wanting to give back, find a way that creative types can come together. We think there's a gap in the market, and we'd love to do it with you. And people would increasingly start saying yes. And as they started saying yes, the more people would say yes. And what that's gone on to mean is we're now fortunate to have 11 reciprocal clubs from around the world. And some of these are the very best clubs in the very best markets. And in London, as an example, really different. Groucho Club was the quintessential club, private members club, set up originally by for the creative, the publishing industry actually. Stephen Fry wrote the house rules for them. We were there.
It's worth the read, actually. It's very funny.
We were there 6 weeks ago, where you have an 80-year-old chewing on a cigar as 2 students arguing about something else in a beautiful palatial old Soho building. The Arts Club is set in Mayfair. It looks like 10 Downing Street. There's a man in a bowler hat and a jacket outside as you open into what is an incredible experience to be part of. And Hospital Club is owned by the guy that set up the Arrhythmics. So we've got Spain, London, Madrid, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Toronto, Los Angeles and New York. And what that means is if you're a member and you're in any one of those clubs, any one of those countries, your name goes onto the door and you use the club like it's your club. Which means if you're trying to do a deal in New York or meet a designer or meet something else, you can get them to meet them at your club. You attend all their events, they look after you, they have cheap accommodation, and it's a wonderful way to help collaborate. And what they're increasingly doing is if we say to them, we've got someone who's a designer coming out to New York, can you help connect them with a designer that's in your membership base? They're looking for those opportunities to collaborate. because they're quite fascinated by New Zealand.
So when we started setting this up, we didn't really know how much it would be used. And last week, in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, we've had people in London. We had 11 in the Shanghai one. We've got someone here at the moment from Budapest, because they come the other way. So we've had sort of, in a membership of 1,400 odd, we've had sort of people in 4 different countries last week using different clubs. So it's seen as a really, obviously one of the great assets of being a member.
On a monthly basis, we run a series of events for members. This ranges from Kylie Bax to Joseph Parker to Sir Ray Avery to Oscar Knightley. We've had James Herman interviewing a madam. She runs one of New Zealand's world's best brothels. She's got a really interesting take on how you break conventions of the categories. We've had her talk. We've had Dame Roseanne Mayo talking about women in business. And our view of these things, they're designed to be stimulating areas of debate. We had Jeff Ross talking about how New Zealand needs to grow up and stop whinging about the fact that we need more commercial support for entrepreneurs, which turned into a City Hall debate. So those are Nat Cheshire, and the names go on and go on. This month coming up, we've got things like a jellyologist talking about how you create with jelly. We've got edible cinema going on. We've got our first big club party, which is a black tie event with a whole lot of weird stuff it's going to show. So it's designed to not only be stimulating but entertaining in a way that there aren't that many of those sorts of offerings around town. We've designed what we believe is the world's first cashless payment app for clubs. So when you walk into our building, if you're a club member, iBeacons know you're here, they'll welcome you to it. You walk up onto the floor. We know, our front of house team know your name, your address, your drink, your last time you were here. You can book tickets on our app. We can send you messages about what's going on in the building. It's something we're taking to clubs now around the world. We use the facilities for hiring it out for events, for kids' parties, for private parties. The food is done by Josh. And all of those things come down to the first stage of delivery for the club. And what we've found, to point 5, is the need to constantly improve. Some of the things that we thought would be very easy have been the hardest. Some of the things we thought would be hard have been really, really easy. But we have gone out often looking for feedback. People have told us, well, we've got it really wrong. We're trying to get it better. It's a hard journey, but people have been patient. Our members have been patient with us. So that's our story, I guess, the work in progress story. Thank you for the opportunity to share it with you. And if there are any questions, then we'd love to try and answer them.